The check arrives. Near the bottom there's a blank line, and in that small blank space sits a quiet decision. 15%? 20? Maybe more. You do the math without thinking. You have done it 1,000 times. But here's a question almost no one asks. That money you are about to leave behind, who is it really for? Is it a thank you? Or is it someone's wage quietly handed to you to pay? This is the story of a small, ordinary habit. And like most things that feel natural, it did not simply happen. It was built, on purpose, by people, for reasons that have very little to do with gratitude. To understand tipping, you have to start somewhere surprising. You have to start with a country that hated it. Tipping was not born in America. Its roots run back to feudal Europe. There, a wealthy lord might press a few coins into a servant's hand. The gesture said something simple. I am above you, and you depend on me. It was a ritual of rank, not a reward for good work. When wealthy Americans began traveling to Europe in the 1800s, they saw this custom and carried it home. They did it the way tourists bring back anything that makes them feel refined. But here's the part the story usually leaves out. Most Americans did not want it. They found it insulting. A country that told itself it had no lords and no servants looked at tipping and saw something foreign and wrong. It looked like the very class system they claimed to have escaped. So they fought it. Reformers called it un-American. Critics called it servile, and some called it a bribe. People formed anti-tipping societies and signed pledges promising never to give or accept a tip again. And this was not just talk. In the early 1900s, 6 states passed laws making tipping illegal. Washington, Arkansas, Iowa, South Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia. Consider what that means. The thing you now feel obligated to do, your great-grandparents tried to outlaw. The anger went deep. In 1916, a writer named William Scott published a book attacking the custom. He compared the bond between the tipper and the tipped to the bond between a master and a slave. A newspaper of the day called tipping viciously un-American. For a while the movement seemed to be winning. Then the First World War arrived, and the country turned its attention elsewhere. The pledges faded, the societies dissolved, and the habit they had tried to kill quietly survived. So how did a practice that America banned become a practice America cannot imagine living without? That is where the story turns. The answer begins in the years after the Civil War. Slavery had ended. Millions of newly freed Black Americans were looking for work, and the industries that hired them found a convenient arrangement. Restaurants, hotels, and railroads could take these workers on and pay them almost nothing. Sometimes nothing at all. The workers were told to make their living from whatever a customer chose to leave behind. The wage was not lowered. It simply never appeared. The clearest example rode the rails. The Pullman Company ran the luxury sleeping cars on America's trains. It hired formerly enslaved men as porters by the thousands. They made the beds, they shined the shoes, they carried the bags. They smiled through long days that stretched past any reasonable limit. For this, Pullman paid them a token wage. By some accounts, it was as little as $12 a month. The rest was left to the passengers. As those trains crossed the country, they carried more than people. They carried an idea. The idea was that a tip was not a bonus added on top of a wage. The tip was the wage itself. And once business owners saw what that idea could do, the old hatred of tipping did not stand a chance. It let them lift the cost of labor off their own books and place it onto the customer. By 1926, every one of those state bans had been repealed or struck down. Then, the arrangement was written into law. In 1938, in the depths of the Great Depression, the federal government created the first minimum wage. It was 25 cents an hour. But tipped workers were left out of it. The law that was meant to put a floor under every worker built a trap door for some of them instead. Decades later, that exception became permanent. A separate lower minimum wage was set for the people who earn tips. Today, the federal floor for a tipped worker can be as low as $2.13 an hour. The theory is that tips will carry them the rest of the way to the standard minimum. The reality is quieter and stranger. The customer now covers part of a payroll that the employer chose not to pay. And most of the time, The customer never notices. There is one more detail worth holding on to. This system, at this scale, barely exists anywhere else on Earth. In most of the world, you simply pay the price on the menu. The tipping country is, in the end, mostly one country. This brings us to the strange place tipping sites today. Almost no one defends the system as it was designed. Surveys show most people now hold a negative view of it, and the average tip has started to slide. And yet every attempt to take it apart keeps collapsing. Look at what happens when restaurants try to end it. In 2015, one of the most respected restaurateurs in America made an announcement. He would remove tipping from all 13 of his New York restaurants. He would raise prices, pay real wages, and finally close the gap between the servers out front and the cooks in the back. A major national chain tried the same thing across many of its locations. For a moment, it looked like the beginning of the end for tipping. Then, one by one, they reversed course. Why? Because two forces pulled hard against each other. The first force was the workers themselves. When tipping went away and flat wages came in, many of the best servers found they earned less. So they left. At one celebrated restaurant group, around 40% of the long-term staff walked out the door. A skilled server in a busy room can out-earn a fixed paycheck, and they know it. The second force was the customer. That means you. When restaurants folded the cost of fair wages into the price of the food, the menu numbers went up, and diners pulled back. The very same person who would gladly leave a 20% tip recoiled at a dish that cost 20% more. The total was identical. But the tip feels optional. The price feels like a verdict. So, the fork comes into view. On one side, tipping is a relic of inequality. It is a way for profitable businesses to make their customers cover the cost of labor. It leaves a worker's income at the mercy of a stranger's mood. On the other side, tipping lets good workers earn far more than any fixed wage would give them. Ending it can cut their pay and cost them their jobs. Both of these things are true at the same time. That is exactly what makes it so hard to fix. And while the argument stays frozen, the tip itself keeps spreading. The screen swivels toward you at the coffee counter. It appears when you buy a bottle of water. It waits at the self-checkout machine after you have scanned and bagged the groceries yourself. A prompt asks for 20%, and you are not even sure who it is for. A system that began on the railroads has crept onto a tablet in almost every kind of transaction. The single blank line on the dinner check has multiplied into 1,000 blank lines, and each one asks the same quiet question. Here is what we can say for certain. Tipping was not handed down by nature. It was imported as a symbol of status. It was rejected as un-American. Then it was rebuilt as a way to avoid paying wages, and at last written into the law of the land. Every step along the way was a choice. None of it was inevitable. So the next time the check arrives and your eyes drop to that blank line, you might feel something more than habit. You might feel the weight of 150 years of decisions pressing down on a single number. And you are left with a question that has no easy answer. The money you are about to leave, is it gratitude? Or is it a wage that someone, somewhere, decided not to pay? And if it is the second one, then why does almost every attempt to change it leave everyone worse off? Maybe the real question was never how much to tip. Maybe it is who was supposed to pay in the first place.